So for me, growing up, my family spent most of their time feeling stuck in their careers. And honestly, I think most of the time they wouldn't even consider themselves to have careers. They might have had jobs, but not careers. See, for my family, a job was just a job. It was something necessary to support their family, something necessary to put food on the table, not necessarily something associated with happiness. And this was especially true for my dad. He was one of the smartest people that I've ever met. He got his law degree. He practiced law for a while, and he realized that he didn't enjoy it. And so he quit. And this was kind of noble, the idea of leaving something that you don't quite enjoy to go and find something that makes you happier. The problem was he didn't end up sacrificing that career as a lawyer for happiness. Ultimately, he just never found either. He never seemed like he had a job that he enjoyed. He never seemed like he was on a path to somewhere, and he never really made any money. So, this talk is about some of the ups and downs that I've dealt with as a professional. And I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned in the hopes that you can use them to strive towards happiness in your life and your career, whatever that may look like for you. So, this story is going to start out at the beginning of my career. I started my career at Microsoft fresh out of college, and my job was a technical evangelist. My job was to get out and speak and give presentations and workshops. And so at the age of 22, I found myself giving presentations to audiences full of developers, many of whom had been writing code longer than I had been alive. And as you can imagine, this is a pretty uncomfortable feeling for me, and I suffered a lot from imposter syndrome. I wondered, what can I possibly offer someone who's been writing code for 20 plus years, maybe longer than I've been alive, if I've just recently graduated from college myself? But the more I did this, the more talks that I gave, I started to realize that people were showing up to hear me speak because there was something that I knew that they didn't, that they wanted to come and learn from me. And I started to build up a lot of confidence. And at the end of my first year, in my review with my manager, who I really enjoyed working with, I got a glowing review, and that led to a pretty big bonus. And at that point, it was time to celebrate. And so I took the money that I got in that bonus from that first year, and I bought a ring to propose to my wife. I'd used that ring to then propose to my wife, and I got married about a year later. And with all this confidence and so many cool things happening in my life, I started to think about what happiness looked like in my career. And I realized there was one thing in particular that I was missing. I had always had this dream of living in New York City. My wife and I had visited a couple times in college. We were just infatuated with the city, and that was something that ultimately I wanted to do. So I mentioned that to my manager. I was in South Florida at the time, and there just happened to be someone that left the team in New York City. So 3 weeks later, my wife and I moved to New York. This is actually the view from our rooftop in Brooklyn overlooking the New York City skyline. And so with that move came a new surroundings, obviously, a new team, and then also a new manager. And unfortunately, I never felt like that manager was really paying attention to me. And I'll give you a couple of examples why. During our one-on-ones, he would often be getting food through the drive-through at McDonald's, or he would be picking up coffee at Starbucks. And I just felt like he was never really paying attention to me. So fast forward to the end of my career at Microsoft, about a year and a half later, when I had my final review with my manager, and I was going into it anticipating I had done my job and I had done my job well, and I expected my review and my bonus to kind of correlate to that, just kind of right in the middle, like I did as good as anybody else kind of thing. And when I got my bonus, I was shocked. It was significantly lower than what I expected. And to make matters worse, my manager couldn't articulate to me why. He couldn't say you didn't do this, or you didn't do this well enough, or in comparison to the team, you didn't do these things well. And he never really said any of that stuff throughout the year as well. So this was a complete shock. And so I felt hurt and I felt shocked. And most importantly, I felt like everything about that situation was out of my control. And I realized two really important things during that. One is that no matter how good or bad your manager is, ultimately, what you do with your career and where you go in your career is up to you. You have to be your own conductor. Wherever it is that you want to go, it's on you to get there. You can certainly have help along the way, and you can have people that may not help you so much, but ultimately, it's up to you. And two, I realized that I should have been more vocal. I should have been asking more direct questions. I should have been asking questions more frequently. I shouldn't have let myself be in the situation to be surprised when that final review came. So you might be wondering, I mentioned that was at the end of my career at Microsoft. You might be wondering why I left an amazing company at Microsoft, one of the top tech companies in the world. And what I haven't explained yet is that in May of 2016, standing on that same rooftop in Brooklyn, overlooking the New York City skyline, my dad called me and told me that he was diagnosed with cancer and had 6 months to live. And my wife and I, at this time, had already been talking a little bit about what the next stage in our life was going to be. We knew New York City wasn't a forever thing. We wanted to buy a house and kind of settle down. So we decided we would move to Memphis and I would be able to spend what time my dad had left with him. As part of that process, I was looking internally at Microsoft to see if I could find some sort of role that would make sense for me to do in Memphis. And long story short, it just didn't work out. So I had interned previously in college at FedEx, and I reached out to my previous manager and said, "Hey, I'm moving to Memphis. I would love to come work at FedEx." And she said, "Well, this is perfect timing because we are about to hire several positions because we've got a lot of work that needs to be done." And so it seemed like everything was kind of coming together and was going to work out relatively okay. But it didn't quite go as expected. When I moved to Memphis, my dad passed away about a week later. So I thought I was going to have 4 to 5 months time to spend with him. I only got a week, and I'm very thankful for that time. But at the end of the day, it wasn't quite what I expected. And then, two, the process to start the interviews at FedEx took a lot longer than I ever expected. So when my dad passed away, there was a lot of logistical things, a lot of emotional things, but a lot of logistical things that came down to me to take care of. My mom had passed away a few years before. So I had a house to take care of, to clean out. I had a car to put in my name, and I had all these things to figure out. And so a month or two after that, my wife started to ask me, "Hey, have you heard anything from FedEx?" And I would say, "I'm just waiting on them to tell me when the interview is." And a month later, she would say the same thing, and I would say the same thing back to her. And then a month after that, she said, "You know how we like to have food and wear clothes and all these things? Those things cost money. Have you heard anything from FedEx?" And I realized that I couldn't control how quickly I was able to have the interview with FedEx. But what I could control was being damn sure that I was as prepared for the interview as I could possibly be when it did come. So I started investing in myself. I started watching YouTube videos. I started taking Udemy courses. I started building portfolios and projects, and I started hanging out in the community and investing in the people around me. And a couple of months later, I had my interview with FedEx. And I talked about all those things that I've been working on and learning. And I didn't know this at the time, but the people who interviewed me walked away from that interview saying, "There's no doubt we absolutely want to hire that person." So looking back, I realized with all the emotional things that were going on in my life at the time, from a career standpoint, I needed to focus on the things that I could control. Again, I couldn't control when that interview would come. I couldn't control when they would call me about the interview, but I could control how prepared I was for that interview at the time. And I was, and I ended up getting the job. And I started my new career at FedEx. And when I joined FedEx, they talked a lot about something called SAFE. And SAFE stands for the Scaled Agile Framework. It's basically a framework around how to do agile at really big companies, hence Scaled Agile Framework. And the way this worked is there was 5 2-week sprints. And during that fifth one, you're supposed to plan for the next 5 and then go and execute and then come back and plan and kind of iterate on that. And that fifth sprint is actually called the Innovation and Planning Sprint, the IP sprint. And so what you're supposed to do is definitely plan, but you're also supposed to be embracing innovation. And everyone at FedEx was talking about how we should be doing hackathons and we should be learning and experimenting and being creative. And I realized that no one was doing that. So in one of our planning events in a room full of not quite this many people, but 60 or 70 people, I stood up and I said, "Hey, we talk about this. No one's actually doing this at all. I would like to try something." And so I ended up getting support to have either 2 or 3 days, depending on the activity, to have a hackathon during this IP sprint so that people could have a free space to get away from their regular desk, to be creative, to experiment, to build, to learn new things. and really kind of push the envelope of our knowledge in terms of technology at FedEx. And that led to some pretty cool stuff. We got to work with some IoT stuff, and we built like a demo that we were able to show off to the entire group. And with that, as this started to get more and more momentum, I got a lot of positive feedback, especially from upper management. Congratulations, great job, kudos, well done, all that kind of stuff. But the thing that really stuck out is someone saying thank you for being vocal. And I looked back on my experience at Microsoft and thinking back about how I wasn't vocal with my manager at the time. And I realized that I had now taken something that I had learned in the past and applied it to my new role and was getting lots of appreciation and recognition and respect from my peers and my management and upper management. So a couple of months later, my manager had a career discussion with me. She wanted to know between two different paths, going in the management route or continuing to grow as an individual contributor, which one would I be more interested in? And I told her that I was not particularly interested in the day-to-day work of being a manager, but I was interested in being a leader in technology. I spent all my time outside of work, being in the community and paying attention to what's new and all these things. I wanted to take that knowledge and apply that and help make decisions and help teach people along the way. So a couple of days later, she brought me into her office and she said there was an architect position available in the organization of 60 or 70 people, and she would like to give me that role. Now, at the time, this was not just a promotion, this was a double promotion. It would have skipped a level in between. And this sounded like exactly what I wanted. So at the age of 27, I became, I don't know this for sure, but probably one of, if not the youngest architects in the entire company at FedEx. And so I got to do a lot of cool stuff. I got to be in meetings where we made technical decisions, and I got to give my recommendations, and I got to draw really cool diagrams. This is actually a legit diagram of teaching someone how a system worked. We ended up taking trips to Europe, and I got to spend time with my team in Europe, and my wife came over and got to meet me in Europe, and we got to have fun. And did I mention I got to travel in first class to do that, which is pretty sweet. So all of that was going pretty well, but eventually that architect position became more and more about meetings. And for me, these meetings didn't seem relevant. They were about other projects that I didn't specifically work on. And I felt like my time was wasted. When I would go to work in the morning, I was less excited about going to work. When I would come home in the evening, I was much more excited to leave work and to go home. And during the day, I was very distracted thinking about the things that I truly enjoyed: creating videos, creating content, teaching people. And so I started to kind of look around at a lot of the people at FedEx, some of the older generation at FedEx, and I started to sound like them. I was complaining about things, but they had also decided this was kind of as good as it gets. Things are the way they are, and they were just going to ride out their career at FedEx and retire and have a good life and all those kind of things, but they still weren't happy necessarily at their job. And I realized that that mentality sounded a lot like how my dad would have looked at his jobs that he had had over the years. This is just what it is. I get paid. It's where I'm going to finish my career. And I realized that's not the part of my dad that I wanted to be. So I ended up realizing I couldn't focus, or I couldn't control how many meetings I was in, but I could control what my job was. So I ended up leaving FedEx and I started my career at Auth0. And now I get to do all of this amazing stuff every day, and it's exactly what I wanted to do. And then a thing that I learned at FedEx was to pay attention to your mood. If you are unhappy with something in your life or your career, it's up to you to make that change, to take what you can control, to be vocal, to be your own conductor, but you have to pay attention to your mood to realize when you need that. And I posted something about this on Twitter, and someone very appropriately commented, "That's really great advice, but not everyone has the privilege to just leave a job or find a job the next day." And I wanted to address this because this was very true. This was extremely true. And so you can't just leave your job or find a new job overnight. But what you can do is you can take an online course to develop your skills. You can watch a couple of YouTube videos to develop your skills. You can reach out to a mentor to ask for advice. You can build out your portfolio, and you can attend community events, and you can invest in the community and network, because you never know which one of those people might lead to your next position. So at this point, if I could talk to my dad, I would say, don't procrastinate. It's never too late. And pay attention to where you are and how you feel and how happy you are, and think about where you want to be and what happiness looks like for you, and mind that gap. find out what that gap is, and take baby steps to get there. So my name is James Q. Quick, and I am incredibly happy with where I am in my life and my career. But I owe it to myself to reflect on that and check in with myself every couple of months just to make sure I'm on the right track. And if not, take baby steps to get back on track. And so do you. Thank you. And I think we'll have some time for questions too.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your talk, James. It was really inspiring. I will have to set up a timer for each month, so it will remind me about the question: are you happy with your job? Yeah, that would be really a great idea. Like you can trademark it. It's yours as
I
a
will
gift
take that and run with it. Yeah.
that you gave the talk. Yeah, regarding the QA, that there were probably no questions during the talk. I have one question, although
Sure.
it was really inspiring. Thank you a lot. Uh, mm, where how come that you had a motivation after you left the New York, which it seemed like a city you loved, and your one of your parents passed away, and you found a motivation to just study the online courses on YouTube. And for me, it sounds like, okay, this is the time when I want to just stay at home for a month and do literally nothing, just be sad.
Yeah.
So how come like this is some incredible piece of self-motivation which I see here, and it seems like something which I would not be able to overcome maybe, or it would be really hard to just do this self-reflection,
Sure.
or to have this moment.
Yeah, well, I think so. A couple of things that are important to remember: the amount of time that it took from my father passing away to starting at FedEx was about 6 months. So when you said you wanted to like lay around the house and be sad for a month, like I certainly did that too. There was a lot of time in there, but I think, like I said, there was just like my wife pushing and kind of questioning me to make sure that like with everything going on, I'm still keeping track of like I need to be working towards a career. It gives you a distraction. I think for me at that point, I just started getting into web development and I really just fell in love with it. And that made it a lot easier to keep going, but it also was a distraction. I felt like I was working towards something. I felt like I had control over something. And that just made it that much easier to continue to work with it. And then obviously it paid off when it came to the interview because I had so much that I could talk about, so much experience from like longer than 6 months, but especially in those couple of months. And then projects and portfolio things that I had built that made it so much easier to go in and really nail that interview. So yeah, I certainly struggled during that time. It was a tough time, or it was definitely a very tough time. But just finding something that I could latch onto, that I could control, that I could invest in, and feel like I'm making progress was the reason that I was able to keep doing it, and then eventually land the job at FedEx.
That absolutely makes sense. Thank you. We have in the meantime there are some questions there from Jesse Hall. Here is the question: why are you so awesome?
I don't know, Jesse or Code Stacker. If you're not familiar with Jesse, he's Code Stacker on YouTube. You should definitely go check him out. He's got screenshots of his courses in this slide deck, by the way.
I will.
So
but
I appreciate that.
Answer is that by nature.
Yes, just naturally, it just happens.
Yeah. Yeah, damn, there is no chance for you, Jesse. I will check it out. I'm just kidding. Yeah, and there is one more question from Lukasz. What can I do once I realize I'm unhappy in a current job? How to find out position I can enjoy more? How to build an interview over opportunities that I probably don't know yet?
Yeah, I think there's several things that come to mind. One, for me at the time, I had never done web development, and I just happened to kind of try out a course on Udemy, and I ended up falling in love with it. And that was after having taken 3 or 4 previous ones on like mobile development and other things. And that was just the thing that clicked. So I think one thing you can definitely do is just kind of expose yourself to more things. I don't know if people here are traditionally developers in the audience or what people do, but if you're a developer, maybe there's other pieces of development that you can experiment with and see if you enjoy. If you are a naturally social person as a developer, there are roles like technical evangelists, or developer advocates, which is what I am now, where you get to have this really good mix of being social and giving presentations and talks and stuff, while also still being very technical and getting the right code. I think another way you do that is by building your network. Like, it sounds odd maybe, but Twitter is a huge place to invest in the developer community and follow people who are interesting to you, who are doing different types of roles, and you can kind of see what they do and how they do it. And I reach out to lots of people that I don't know to ask them things about their job. If there's something you think you might be interested in, find someone who does that and reach out to them and use them as a mentor and build out your network, because you never know which one of those random jobs or which one of those random companies or which one of those random people will help lead to your next job in the future. So just becoming overall more aware by being in meetups like this, by being online on Twitter, by having your people that you hang out with and you trust either in person or online, you have that many more people to bounce ideas around with, and then kind of find out more about their careers and see how that might help you out in the future.
Thanks. Hopefully it was sufficient answer for Lucas. Daniel is asking, hello, thanks for sharing your experiences. My question is, what would be an optimal job for a junior with 2 to 3 years of experience in coding?
Sure. I mean, the cliche answer is it obviously depends. It depends on what your particular interests are. For me, coming out of college with no experience, for me to work at Microsoft as a technical evangelist was certainly an optimal job for me, but it was not very much programming. It was more about this side, the speaking and the presentations and stuff. So that's very different than the route that most people would traditionally take. So in terms of you specifically, if you have any idea of what is it that you want to do long term, then you kind of backtrack from there. If I wanted to eventually be a speaker, a professional speaker, then getting into a technical evangelist role was really helpful for that. If my goal was to be the most technical and the best software developer in the world, then I would want to find a role that does software development every day. So I would say just think about the things that you're most interested in and what that might look like in 10 years, and then try to backtrack from there. And like same or similar to the answer previously, talk to people, ask people who do these jobs and see how they started and what their first role was or their second role. And then you can kind of gauge how that fits for you, and you can do your research and find companies and opportunities, and then apply hopefully for something that puts you down the baby steps towards your longer term goal of whatever that path is for you.
Yep, the backtracking seems really reasonable. Hope, Daniel, that the answer was sufficient. Thank you, James.